Want to say thanks again. I am moved. I'm moved by the testimony and the movements that we've all seen manifest across this country. I am moved by the urgent need to act to make sure that people have the services and the housing and the health services that they need in order to sustain the crisis of this pandemic. And I am moved by the urgency to make sure that our workers and our smallest businesses have the support that they need so that they can continue to offer services and that there will be employment for workers as we recover from this crisis. I'm moved to do this work because all of you have stepped up in so many ways this year to make sure that we have done the work of budgeting through a racial justice lens, and that we have come together in this time that requires us to act outside of our comfort zone and push the bounds in terms of what council had previously considered their responsibility as it relates to the budget. This was no easy task. When it came to COVID, economic downturn, civil rights uprising, and working remote, back-to-back meetings and passing the Jumpstart progressive tax revenue, it is really an incredible list of things that this council has been able to act upon in a very short time. And we are going to continue to work together. We are going to continue to work to make sure that our community has the services it needs. And we now, thanks to your work, thanks to Central Staff's help and leadership as well, we have $40 million in reserves that we know we will immediately need to begin looking at as we help those who are dealing with the third wave of COVID and the unexpected nature of COVID and the economic downturn that will manifest in 2021. This will be a robust process, and we want to lead that effort with the community partners, many of whom we have engaged with over months to create the Jumpstart progressive tax proposal and identify ways that we can refund or rebuild that original spend plan that was planning to invest up to $89 million in assistance for COVID relief. We know that the crisis is urgent, and we have invested in many ways this summer and through this budget process in preparation for the worst yet to come. Your council, your city is working for you. We are stepping up to make sure that there is a hand to hold through this crisis of the economic downturn and the uncertainty that the pandemic is imposing on our health and our livelihoods over the next year. I'm really proud of the work that we've done together. And I say that in the same breath where I say, I know we have much more work to do. This morning's conversation, the last 2 months worth of conversation, the conversation since June and May and previously in the spring of this year, we know there is tremendous work that must be accomplished together, and that across the country, people are demanding more of their electeds, and we need to be bold, we need to be courageous, and we need to keep pushing ourselves out of our comfort zone. We have done that in many ways, and we will continue to need to do so in the upcoming months. In this budget, you'll see the ways in which we have worked together to identify investments in not just recovery, but a more equitable recovery, recognizing we should not go back to the way things were before, when so many at the bottom had so little, and just a very few at the top in this city had so much. We want a more equitable recovery, and that's what Jumpstart's progressive payroll tax begins to do. We've also invested in making sure that more folks, more working families, more small businesses can sustain this crisis by having assistance to small business support, rental assistance, eviction prevention, food assistance, childcare. You all have made it possible for people to have greater self-sufficiency and economic stability, which also helps our health. Because when we live in chronic poverty or generational poverty, or we're on the cusp of not being able to pay our rent or pay for our property if you have a small business, that chronic stress also hurts your physical health. And right now, we need everybody in this city to be healthy. We've invested in direct measures to make us healthy as a city. We've made sure that there's hand washing facilities and garbage cleanup. We've made sure that folks have access to good, high quality food through Fresh Bucks program, and that we've also maintained commitments to make sure that there's access to ethnically diverse food across our city for our most diverse populations. You know, this is about how we invest through a racial equity lens, and making sure that people stay healthy requires food and a place to call home. We've said repeatedly in this budget that in order to stay healthy, you have to stay home. That's the mandate. But far too many people in our city don't have a place to call home. They don't have a place to call home even for a night, because our shelters are at capacity. And the crisis of living without the ability to have shelter in this moment is manifesting itself in the street. And every one of our neighbors, each one of us as council members, every resident across the city has seen the consequence of years of divestment in affordable housing and years of not sufficient investment in shelter services and the human services necessary to make sure that our outreach efforts and our housing efforts for those who are living unsheltered in our city are sufficient. And right now, we're seeing that play out with more people living in tents and RVs, more people sleeping in the doorways. And this budget makes historic investments in helping those who are living unsheltered in our community. We want to not only help make sure that they have access to the necessary resources, but help get them sheltered and inside. That's what I'm really proud about in this budget. We've invested in tiny homes. We've invested in hotel sheltering. We've invested in non-congregate shelter options, because even the homeless service providers themselves have said that the old ways of congregate shelters are just not working. There's more humane ways and holistic ways to help make sure that people have the services they need. And our budget makes those historic and necessary investments. We're investing in direct housing as well. And we're doing it through the lens of what the community needs. Everything from making sure that the folks at Africatown have the pre-development costs they need to really invest in the shelter services that will lead to permanent supportive housing, to making sure that our friends at Aurora Commons have the funding that they finally have been asking for so long. We made sure that the $30 million that we had committed to 2 years ago through the sale of the public land at Mercer Megablock is maintained, so that $30 million goes directly into communities at the highest risk of displacement. And that's our community of color population. We want to welcome new neighbors coming into our city and be a welcoming city just as much as we want to prevent displacement and gentrification. And this budget makes those investments. We're investing in the housing. We know we need much more though, and it will require us to work in partnership with the county and also at the state. And I'm really looking forward to having those conversations with the new federal administration. Because right now we're at a 40-year historic low in housing investments from our federal government. These issues of housing and homelessness, the crisis of mental health services, and the lack of access to comprehensive services cannot just be addressed at the city level alone. And I'm really excited about the partnership that we could potentially have with the new administration to invest in housing, homelessness services, and our health services. Folks, in this budget, we have made strides towards actually investing in Green New Deal principles. And we're doing that by making sure that people have access to sidewalks from Rainier Beach to Beacon Hill, from 45th Avenue to South Park, sidewalks, pedestrian ways, bike-friendly avenues so that people aren't in the street, and we're actually creating protected bikeways across our city. We're making sure that the Green New Deal investments that you all approve through the Jumpstart Progressive Tax legislation has an on-ramp. For 2022, we've invested in making sure that our departments, Office of Sustainability and Equity, have the ability to get, and the environment have the ability to actually ramp up for those Green New Deal investments by also making sure that they have the personnel, direct titles that include Green New Deal labels, so that we are getting prepared as a city. And we're doing major investments in making sure that our buildings are energy efficient. This is what it looks like to make sure that our values as a council are represented in a city budget. And we've made tremendous changes to the proposed budget that came down. I think as folks comb through the budget, and I hope you do, thanks to the incredible work of the communications team, you now have excellent tutorials on the screen to show you various components within the budget. I hope you will comb through it and see the ways in which this council has not only stepped up to lead in a moment of crisis that is the economic downturn and COVID pandemic, but the ways in which these investments are centering communities of color as we think about what it means to create greater sustainability and self-sufficiency. Let's make sure that we're investing in areas that have been historically underfunded in the past. And let's lift those items in this budget up and recognize what we've done and where we still need to go. I'm really thankful for all of your work as it comes to public safety. I just want to reiterate the important work that we've all done and the historic nature of it. This council set out to really do three things this year. Shrink the SPD's budget in areas where we knew we've asked our officers to step into areas of mental health services and case management that we should be actually doing through community. And you all have done that in partnership with the community. We've helped shrink areas where we knew those services could be better served in health and human services in a standalone department or in community investments. You all have made those reductions possible. We set out to invest in community alternatives. We're investing a historic amount in direct community strategies through the participatory budgeting process, through the task force, by making sure that the 10 million that we committed to earlier this year gets directly out into communities, and now 12 million actually. You've all made that possible. And the third thing is we now have also committed to making sure that we're not growing the size of the police department as we also seek to increase the size and capacity of our community partners. We've helped to make sure that we're scaling up community-based programs and services, community-based alternatives to addressing harm, and making sure that there's a restorative justice pilot program, programming for Black girls and young women and Black, queer, and trans youth. There's so many pieces that I will let all of you highlight, in addition to the ways in which you have helped to pull out mental health services from our traditional public safety model and really make sure that we have our community being treated by those who have those mental health skills, and our firefighters. We have lifted up all of so many investments, and I'll let Councilmember Herbold, and I'll summarize on some of those pieces as well, talk about the ways in which we've scaled up our firefighter department by making sure that they have trauma-informed counseling, because we know that this year's been tremendously hard, and that they have the support that they need to scale up that third Health One team. It's been a long year, and I will try to not be any more long-winded, just to say thank you. And it's been a real honor and a privilege to be able to work with all of you